All right, so this is going to be episode 1 to UA year 1. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
The bad bitch like she average. I'm a savage, no hoe, what you want do. I'm about cash if the raw fast. I'ma get that little nigga by any means.
All right, so before we get started with the kind of episode, this, like I said before, actually takes place around 100 years past or 100 years plus into the past. So there is no real connection between the present characters, and this is also at a time where the majority of the population did not have quirks, and the quirks that were there aren't as powerful, or most of them weren't as powerful as quirks of the present. So yeah, and if you want to participate and have your OC in the series, then go to my Discord, which will be linked down below. So anyways, yeah, so for the criteria of getting into the kind of show, I guess, is have a character, right? Don't make it too overpowered, and try to make your powers kind of original. They could have some inspirations from other shows and animes and things like that, but don't be like blatant, ripoffs, or even like have too many references to that anime, I guess. And also don't make your characters any like supernatural, right? Like things like anything that can't be explained by science, basically. So have it somewhat grounded in reality, but there could be some parts that are fantastical, I guess, in nature. But yeah, just try to keep it grounded in some way. And yeah, so our story starts off with our character Apollo Hayes, to be exact. And he's walking home from the last day of his middle school, and he's basically reminiscing on what his life has been at this point. And life was kind of a mixed bag for him. At first, he was very much bullied for having a quirk. At this time, only 30% of the population of the world had quirks basically. And at this time, people did not really know he had a quirk until it manifested. His quirk being tapestry. His quirk allows him to create tattoos on his body, and these tattoos can become physical objects, but they cannot detach from his body. He could also create other things, but I'll explain that later on. So he was not really recognized. People didn't really know he had a quirk until one day he showed up with tattoos, right? And it was found out that that was his quirk. So he typically has tapestry type tattoos on his arms as a kind of showing pride for his quirks, because he was kind of bullied for a long time because of these kind of discriminations against people with quirks, since they were looked at as so strange. He was bullied up until his second year in middle school, and this is where he got a growth spurt. He became a lot stronger, and he knew how to use his quirk better. So when bullies came up to him to fight him, he would just show them one quick peek of his quirk, and they would just get scared off. Typically he fights with his claws, but he's able to create using his quirk, but he never really had a chance to use them. And because of this, a lot of people were scared of him. People really didn't hang out with him because of his quirk, and people who did either did that because they were scared of him or because they wanted protection. So he had no real friends, and people just isolated him. And this also spread to his parents, right? His parents were somewhat wealthy. His quirk was a great combination of both. His quirk was so unique, but yet it shows his roots with his parents. His quirk was like it combined in such a way that it was nearly a perfect match. His mother's quirk was thoughtography, the ability to create images and put them on any surface using your mind. And she used this ability to become a freelance artist and get a rather large sum of money because of it. His father's quirk was heart-like creation. Both of them were not heroes at any means, And his father really didn't use his quirk that often, and the things he created were just simple things that help, daily life. He never thought of becoming a hero, and he never really wanted to. But the combination of these two quirks created his son's quirk, Tapestry. So, as he's thinking about this, he wonders what he's going to do with the rest of his life, because he could choose to go into high school or to go into the straight work field, but he doesn't really want to do that. He wants to become a hero, and the reason for this is because recently that the Hero Association was just established, and there was an entire ranking system. The number one hero, which he admired, was Frostbite, the quirk user that had frost breath. It was simple but yet effective, and he wanted to be something like that, something where he could contribute to society using his quirk. And this really inspired him, which was rather odd for Apollo, since Apollo was kind of lazy. He was never really that enthusiastic for anything because of how people treated him. He got things easy in life, but he knew that that's not supposed to happen, but he didn't know how to change it. He didn't know how to get people to actually listen to him, so he continued down that path. And he wasn't really, weak at any means. He always trained his body to one day to, keep that appearance at school and to one day maybe become a hero. He also was not really that dumb either. He was a B student at best, or at worst. And he kept it that way. He didn't really want to stand out. So eventually he gets home, he takes off his shoes, and he goes upstairs to continue thinking of what he wants to do with the rest of his life. And this is when his father comes to his room and tells him that he got a letter. And this letter is from a school called UA. At this time, UA was a very small kind of school, not yet being open to the public and not yet having any students. So this was a shock to Apollo at this time, since this would be the first class of UA ever. So he was kind of excited because he had learned on the news that UA was going to be one of many schools that were going to try to basically train up becoming heroes. And he was wondering, how did they find my address, right? Because Apollo lived in a very small community, right? Not many people there had quirks. It was a very small community, and people who did kept to themselves, right? But people like Apollo's family were almost isolated because they were so open about their quirks. So it was very strange to see, a letter from UA to come to them. But it turns out that UA, using the permission of the government, used the kind of medical records to find people suitable for their first hero class. So Apollo was thinking, if we go to UA, then I would have to move, right? That's what he's thinking in his mind. And he's thinking, do I really have anything to, for me to stay? And he's thinking about this very hard. And he comes up with the conclusion that no, he has no reason to be there. He has no friends, and no one really would care, and maybe people would be glad if he wasn't there. So he would try to, he would want to go to UA. He gives the decision to his father, and he says, I want to go to UA. I want to become a hero. And his mom chimes in and says, well, they are more accepting of quirks in the city, and we do have enough cash to go, so there's nothing really tying us down here. So they decide to go to the city and go to UA. UA did pay for some of the traveling costs and things like that, but it was only around 50%. So, Apollo would be very excited to go to UA, since it's the first time he's actually able to use his quirk efficiently. So we get to the first year, or the first day of UA, and we start off with the orientation that the principal is actually having. The principal started like this, the speech. Ladies and gentlemen, Students, future heroes. We created schools like UA so that we could see the progression of the younger generation. We live in a time where human beings are getting powers. We don't know why, but it's happening. More and more people are getting powers, and one day you could just look at the statistics, and more people that are getting born are more likely to have quirks. And with this knowledge, we know that more and more people are going to have more powerful quirks, and we need some way to have order. So that's why we created schools like UA. We need places to flourish young minds and young, heroes. We want them to contribute to society. So that's why we created things like this. You all have your classes, and each class, there's 3 types. There's the hero course, the general studies, and the supports. And there's going to be 4 or 5 different hero course classes. The top one being 1A, then 1B, 1C, 1D, and then 1E. Each of them ranking from the top hero to the lowest. There's also going to be the support class and the general studies. But there's also a catch to this. There was no test given for entry to UA. There was nothing of that sort. We all based your power off of paper, right? So if we thought your quirk was stronger than others, we put you in a higher class. And you might be thinking that that's unfair. And yes, it is unfair. That's why we did it. UA has to look like it's strong. It has to look like it's powerful. And to the public, it needs to look like that. But there is a catch. There is a ranking system from the top hero to the lowest. And if you think that you deserve to be in a higher class, then you could climb up the ranks and go to that class. But here's the thing. Each class will have a class representative and a vice representative, right? And to become those, you don't become one by voting or anything like that. There will be a basic tournament, and the winners will become the vice and the representative and vice representative respectively. And those who choose, or those who become representatives, can either choose to try to become part of the next class by challenging someone chosen by their representative, and if you beat them, you'll be able to go to the next class, and that person who lost will go to your class instead. Or you could choose to stay in your class and grow that way. If you are not chosen to become the class representative, you must fight 5 different people from your class and then have the opportunity to challenge either the vice or representative of your class. Beat them, and then you could challenge the next class. Continue beating students, and you'll get to class 1A. But you will have to have a minimum of 1 week in that class before you could challenge the next class. So with that being said, you all have your updated classes, so go there. So all of the students there dissipated and they went their separate ways. At this time, Apollo was kind of shaking. He was very excited. This was strange for him since he was never really enthusiastic to begin with, and that's just saying it lightly. So after this was done, he continued walking, and he was excited to see how his quirk would evolve and get stronger. He looked at his paper, and the excitement faded away. He looks somewhat, as his normal expression would be, kind of out of it. He looked at his paper, and it said what he hoped it wouldn't, and that was that he was in class 1E. He was somewhat disappointed, but at the same time, he realized that if he was in 1E, he would have to work harder than before, harder than ever in his life, which got him somewhat excited. He thought out loud and basically said that I'm going to be number one, I'm gonna be number one in UA, and then I'm gonna become a pro hero. People heard this and they were all giving him looks, right? Because he shouted this out basically. And it wasn't only the only reason why they were looking at him. He had some peculiar things about him, mostly his wardrobe. You know, compared to the other students there who wore normal kind of school outfits, his was kind of modified because of the nature of his quirk. And it was approved by the students or the school body, so he was allowed to wear it. And that being that he had a normal kind of outfit, it's just that he had no sleeves. So it was very strange to everyone. And he had tattoos owing up his arms, which made everyone kind of uncomfortable due to the kind of stigma tattoos have in Japan. So he walked and he got to class 1E and he looked at the class and he thought to himself, like, I'm gonna have to beat everyone in here to get to the next class. So I'm gonna end it here. This was just part 1, and then in part 2 we'll go over other stuff. I'm not gonna spoil anything. So yeah, if you guys want to be a part of this series, go down below and actually go to my Discord, and there you can actually post your kind of student name and or teacher, student name, teacher, or villain that you want to be in the series. And just don't make his like power or his quirk very overpowered and things like that. Don't put any unnecessary details. Just put like personality, likes, dislikes, name, both hero or real name, and then don't put any like supernatural elements to it. So yeah, with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video. So yeah,